Well, hi, everybody. My name's Julie. I'm an alcoholic. And I want to thank you for inviting me to this group. When I heard the speakers that are upcoming, I feel like I'm amongst really great company. And I'm always honored and humbled and grateful that I have anything to say about these steps in this program and our beautiful fellowship. Thank you. I saw Summer hop on. Summer and I met on Zoom in Barcelona. So I'm here because of just visiting meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous all over the globe. So thank you for asking me to talk on step 12. In many ways, I wish that you could all unmute and this could be a conversation, because I think there are as many ways to talk about step 12 as there are people who are qualified to do 12-step calls and to work with others. This is a program that relies, we're told in the very beginning that you can rely on anything we have to say about ourselves, which means step 12 is about sharing my experience, my strength, and my hope, my heart, my drinking, my tragedies, my defects, my family, my successes, my failures, my struggles, my God, my spiritual solution, is the foundation of what I have to offer somebody new. So there's always a tension for me in, trying to be somewhat of I don't want to say an expert in AA or an expert in our 12 steps. It's really about, speaking the language of the heart and really having something to transmit. We're told that working with others is vital to recovery. It's vital to permanent recovery, right at the very beginning of the book. And I feel like it's important for me to start by telling you what informs my 12-step work, which is, my drinking. I am an alcoholic. I got sober very young. My sobriety date is August 5th of 1987. So I have 36 years of sobriety, and on top of never having a legal drink. I got sober at 16 years old after having a tremendous amount of consequences from my drinking. I was a kid who was institutionalized. I was sent to 3 different versions of treatment for my alcoholism. My parents changed the locks on the house, put everything I belonged in hefty bags, and waltzed me down to the judge and terminated their parental rights because they did not want to raise this alcoholic who was absolutely a tornado roaring through their lives. So the consequences from my drinking were really swift. And they started, I should say, the consequences not of my drinking, but of my alcoholism, because my alcoholism presented long before I really truly became a alcohol-seeking alcoholic. Right? That my restlessness, my irritability, my discontentedness, my nervous disposition, my sensitive nature, all of that showed up long before I started drinking. In fact, my family of origin was just gathered a few weeks ago. I was chatting with people before the meeting. And Julie's stories always materialize when I'm with my family of origin. And instead of a lot of the drinking stories, I heard from people how angry I was and how scary I was and how people walked on eggshells around me because I was scary to be around, and drinking fixed that. And then until drinking made it worse. And then I think because of the consequences of my drinking, I was introduced to Alcoholics Anonymous in this way of life much, much faster than if I had been left alone, and in some ways, maybe even codependently allowed to keep drinking in sort of a slower progression. But the disease in me was fast, it was potent, was painful, and it really I created a lot of destruction. So I had experience very early on of my life is unmanageable. My grappling with powerlessness was a little bit more challenging, but you know, alcohol brought me there really fast. I mean, uh, Alcoholics Anonymous was at first a consequence. You know, I was sent here. I met amazing old people as a young person, and thought, oh my gosh, if I have to be with these old people the rest of my life, and I'm sitting here with a lot of gray hair now, and now when I speak in meetings, I have a lot of people come up to me afterwards and say, oh my gosh, you've been sober longer than I've been alive. And, you know, I just love it when you do that. Feel free to tell me that after the meeting. It's really fun for me. And it's something that I did for a really long time as a new person, as a young person. But, you know, the other thing that really informed, and so I got sober. You know, I drank my way, even though I had Alcoholics Anonymous placed at my doorstep. I had the kit of spiritual tools available to me. I had well-meaning counselors. I had parents in the background who were doing what they could to get me into decent treatment centers, get me in front of really great help and support without my even knowing it. I had treatment experiences. I was driven in the white van to meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous. I had members of AA welcome me with coffee and cookies and all the love that we have here in AA. And I did not partake. I did not pick up the kit of spiritual tools. I had to drink again and again and again. And I drank myself into a first step. And once I did that, I really joined Alcoholics Anonymous in August of '87. And from there, I got a sponsor. I came all the way in, I sat all the way down, and I worked all of these 12 steps. And, you know, I didn't start sponsoring immediately, but I helped. I did service wherever I could, and whoever I could help, I wanted to help. And I built a life here in AA. I was a high school dropout. I now have a master's degree. I was unemployed and unemployable, and you know, I have a job that feels like a big job that I've been at for over a decade, where they rely on me and depend on me and call me director. Actually, I'm a director, and I, you know, and I'm self-supporting through my, you know, through that work, and that feels good. I was rejected and outcast from friends and family, and I have a host of friends and family around me now. I am a useful member of my community, both my Alcoholics Anonymous community and my work community, and you know, my family of origin, and you know, my children, and you know, I am a miracle. And I'm a miracle because I am part of the great ecosystem of this amazing recovery. So the other thing so I have a solution. I've been given a solution. I've worked that solution, and now I can share that solution. That solution is also informed for me by many big book studies, by walking through the big book multiple times, as a sponsee, as a student of big book studies, and by the countless times I've sat down with other women and read line by line and looked at what we do and what it says, and when we pray and when we write and when we talk and when we confess, and you know, when we help and when we do all the things. And so there's this like merger of knowing what was foundational for the first members in what we're supposed to do and what really works and what's potent to treat the alcoholic, and my own experience in so doing. And, you know, and having those two things work, the interplay of those two things for me has been really critical, because I've lived in sobriety I'm going to run through the states where I've been sober. I got sober in upstate New York. So I lived in Rochester, New York for 4 years in sobriety. That's where I had the foundation, that's where my foundation was laid. My first sponsors were there. My first trip through the steps was there. My first attempts at sponsorship, at sponsoring was there. A lot of service work was there. At 4 years sober, I moved to the Bay Area of California. I lived in the 3 cities of San Francisco for about 5 years. And then I lived in Oakland for a couple of years. And then I lived in Berkeley for a couple of years. And those are close together, but they're very different cities. So, different flavors of Alcoholics Anonymous there as well. And from there, I moved, my husband and I moved to Iowa City, Iowa, where I lived for 6 years, which is a very different recovery community in Alcoholics Anonymous. And, was an active, grateful member there. From there, we moved to the very small town of Big Rapids, not even Big Rapids, outside of Big Rapids, Michigan, which is, again, a really teeny tiny Alcoholics Anonymous community where, again, I was a member among members to the best of my ability and, had sponsees, mainly distance, was a really, really small AA world there. From there, moved down to Jonesboro, Arkansas, which is, again, a very different experience of Alcoholics Anonymous, and lived there for 4 years. And now I live in Seattle, Washington, where I've been for probably 11 and a half, almost a dozen years here in Seattle. And Seattle's the place I've lived longest in my sobriety, and I feel really rooted and grounded here in the Pacific Northwest. And although I've been a member among members everywhere, I feel like because there's been some longevity here, I have really been able to create the fellowship that I crave living here. So I bring all that up to say that I have had many different kinds of sponsors and sponsorship. I've had many different varieties of fellowship in Alcoholics Anonymous. Service has looked the same and different everywhere I've been. We call it, there's always somebody working with another. There's always a meeting. There's always steps and traditions and now concepts on the walls. We're always working from the big book, but sometimes it sounds different. Sometimes it feels different. And everywhere I've been, there's always a group that, that knows how to do it right and knows how to do it best. And as somebody who moves from place to place, I have learned to take my lead from wherever I am. I bloom where I'm planted, wherever I've been. I've done it far less gracefully in the beginning, but I've moved around enough to know that, what it talks about in the big book when working with others is really not about what my method is, right? But it's really about getting to know the alcoholic. First and foremost, it's about learning about the alcoholic's history, learning about the alcoholic's past, learning about, and the big book talks about two sentences before talking about that. I also want to say, when I look at the big book for my instructions in working with others, it always helps to be reminded and think about how this big book was put together written almost exclusively by Bill Wilson with a little help from a few others, with the intention of getting a 12-step package in print to send out to the frontier to all of those alcoholics who don't have the benefit of meetings and gatherings with other alcoholics at their disposal. And so when I interpret these instructions, just having that as the foundational basis for the instructions is really helpful for me to remember, because today's Alcoholics Anonymous it's different. I don't receive this big book on the frontier. I didn't receive this big book as a sole person by myself looking for a solution. My spouse or my mom or my dad or a troubled family member didn't receive this looking for an answer for their kiddo or their spouse or their loved one. I received this not long after, but I received this after I knew of Alcoholics Anonymous. I knew that it worked. I knew other people in the program. I had been sent here. I'd been to meetings, and I didn't get into the book until long after I was in a fellowship. So, today's 12-step is often done in the greeting line of a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. You know what I mean? Like today's 12-step call is rarely at the bedside of an alcoholic or on the other end of the phone at an intergroup or a central office. You know, we have 12-step opportunities at every single meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous I attend, and every single time I take the opportunity to pick up the phone and call a newcomer and get in touch with a newcomer. So when I look to the big book for my instructions, you know, I can take what I see in the print here and bring it to meetings with me, and bring it to my phone calls with me, and bring it to my meetings with potential and actual sponsees or anybody who's calling for an outreach call. And so when I get into the book, I'm looking at the chapter, you know, working with others, which is really where the 12-step starts. You know, the 12-step is really in three parts. You know, having had a spiritual awakening as the result of the first 11 steps that I've worked up to this point, you know, I turn my attention to working with others, and then I practice these principles in all my affairs. And so the assumption is that by the time I get to the place where I'm getting ready to work with other alcoholics and bring them to the solution that I have is rooted and grounded in the absolute certainty that there's a higher power, it working in my life to resolve my alcoholism. And that is not just that I've put down the booze, right? It is that I have a solution for my twists of character, that I have a solution for my anxious apartness, that I have a solution for the way I walk into a room and it could be filled with all my best friends, and yet I still feel like I don't belong. It is a solution for why when you tell me you love me, I'm like, you know, yeah, but it is a solution for why I just don't feel quite right in my skin, and that the thing that made me feel good yesterday isn't really making me feel as good today. I'm not getting a hit from the same way that I did from the things I got yesterday. You know, these first 11 steps, you know, for the 4 through 9 process really cleans up a lot of the garbage. You know, it's not garbage. It cleans up the way that I treated and survived these twists of character and these broken relationships to the very best of my ability before I was given a spiritual answer to my spiritual malady. And now that I have a spiritual solution for these very like soul sickness problems, I have an answer for the still suffering alcoholic. And I think that's a really important premise before moving into working with others, because I can't transmit what I haven't got. I think that's what I started out by saying. So when I turned to the book, having had a spiritual awakening as a result of the steps, I look to the big book, and it tells me to do things like, you know, talk about some of my drinking habits, talk about my symptoms and experiences, talk about myself, talk about my escapades, describe myself as an alcoholic, get to know the person's religious or spiritual leanings, get to know, like, you know, how close to a bottom they are, get to know how desperate they are, get to know how open they are to a spiritual solution. And then, you know, I love that our book tells us to, you know, not talk down from any moral or spiritual hilltop, that, you know, what we really have is a kit of spiritual tools. And my job is to lay out that kit of spiritual tools, the tools that I work, the tools of sponsorship and how I have and use a sponsor, the tools of meetings, the tool of having a home group, the tool of being of service, the tool of prayer, the tool of pause, the tool of telephone. You know, there are, you know, all of these tools are, you know, the constellation that makes up this recovery for me. And you know, before I even engage in step work, before we go line by line in the big book, I really like to lay the kid of spiritual tools at their feet so that, that this isn't a homework assignment to be done as a school project. This is, the big book is another tool. The literature is an amazing tool to recovery, but it's not, for me, done without fellowship, without service, without joining, without laughter, without a sense of belonging and connectedness to, really the ecosystem of Alcoholics Anonymous as a whole. So where do I want to go from there? What I do with the big book with people in my 12-step is I get down to reading line by line, page by page, word by word. The first pass through, I do my darndest not to do the deepest dive. I don't want to look up every single word and meaning. I know that might be, and I will say the reason I do it that way is I can't even tell you in my experience working with others, how many times I sit down with new women who are on their, second, third, fourth, fifth, 10th sponsor, and they have a big book, and their big book has all these underlines, all these highlights, and all these definitions. And they've told me about their experiences sitting next to somebody who read the big book to them and told them what to underline and told them what to highlight and told them what all the definitions are. And they were like, I don't know, if somebody told me to write this. And and all of that stuff is really good information, and it blows my mind. And I'm like, oh, tell me what your sponsor said. Oh yeah, because I know that history, it's blah, blah, blah. And I get off on all of that. Don't get me wrong. I am like a total AA history geek, and I would love a totally different talk about that. But working with others, especially with newcomers, this book has to come alive for you in the way that it is alive for me. I want you to have your experience of the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. I don't want you to have my experience of it. I don't want you to have my big book study leaders' experience of it. I want this to come. I want the points of identification to be as real for you as they were for me. I found myself in these pages, and I want you to find yourself in these pages too. So yes, I do some guiding, and I do some highlighting, and I do some pointing out, and did you notice, and what do you think, and let's pause here, and why don't you write about that, and here's the assignment, we'll come back and we'll talk about it. But I really have, through living in lots of different places and hearing the different ways that people do it, I'm sort of an AA mutt. I have a sponsor who's 48 years sober in the same group, all 48 years. So I love and value that experience, right? And I am completely different from that, where I have so many other people's experience doing it that I just, for me, this book did, when it finally came alive, it was a whole different ballgame. So I really try to work with people to make this, to have this tool of literature blow their minds, and so that they have their own personal experience with it. Same thing with higher power, same thing with fellowship, same thing with finding the home group that really speaks to them. I love seeing my sponsees in my meetings. That said, if my home group isn't your flavor, you find a home group that is your flavor. I mean, working with others is not that I get little, the goal isn't to have little mini Julies in a flock following behind me, right? The goal isn't anything about me. The goal is about you and your higher power and this demonstration of recovery in your life. My sponsor always says that every time she speaks, she says, the minute we get sober, at least 10 people sleep better at night, and I don't know, she's like probably making up that number or that statistic or whatever, but it's so true. And I don't know who your 10 people are. I can name my 10 plus people who slept better as a result of my sobriety. And, I sleep better at night when a newcomer comes to me in desperation. And I don't know why I'm crying right now. It's so profound to have the, to have the opportunity to really help people come to a way of living that allows their moms to sleep at night. You know what I mean? And I get to be a small part of that. It's not about me and my ego and my method and my wealth of knowledge in the history of this book. It's really about your mom sleeping better at night. Okay, I need to recover from that to come back here. Actually, that's a really good segue, because in speaking about this topic, I think I get so enthusiastic about working with others. I'll say about that lastly that I sponsor probably more women now than I have ever sponsored in all of my, more women at the same time than I've ever sponsored in my sobriety. And which means my phone is always ringing. I'm always have a front seat to miracles. I have a front seat to demonstrations of letting go of things they can't change and having tremendous bravery and courage to change the things they can. And that inspires me to let go of the things that I can't change and have courage to change the things I can, which in turn gives them more courage and more surrender. It's iterative. I help them, they help me. We walk shoulder to shoulder together. We have a lot of fun together. We laugh a lot together. I'm always losing a sponsee. I'm always getting a new sponsee. I am not like, this is fluid. I believe that sometimes I get sponsees for a minute, for a moment, for a year, or sometimes for a lifetime. And that said, I don't have to have the title of sponsor to feel helpful, to feel useful, to stand at the doorway of my home group and greet every single person who comes in. I've had many people come back to me after the fact, after, not seeing people for a really long time, and come back to me and pull me aside and say, I came back because you remembered my name, or, I remember my first meeting and you gave me the warmest hug and I felt so welcome and I knew that I could be here. That is working with others. That is working with others. So just because you don't feel qualified to be a sponsor just yet, we're all here to help. If we have 5 minutes of sobriety, we have 5 minutes more than the newcomer who is still drunk. And we can always be helpful. Always, always, always. That smile, a wink, a nod, a hug, a how are you, a follow-up phone call, a coffee date can mean the world to those of us who relate to the anxious apartness that is my organic makeup. So, but the other thing I want to talk about is, the larger demonstration ahead. I was a tornado roaring through the lives of my family, my friends, and everybody in my path. And remorseful mumbling did not fill the bill that the demonstration of practicing these principles in all my affairs, we have a chapter to, it's called To Wives, but we can interpret that as to partners, to boyfriends, girlfriends, other friends, spouses, significant others. There's a wealth of information in there about demonstrating the principles of our recovery in our romantic relationships. There's a chapter to our families, our families afterwards, how to live with and reintegrate and play with, our families, whether there are families of origin like me. I was a young person coming in, so I did not have a spouse or kids, but I had a sister. I still have a sister. I'm still demonstrating this recovery in my relationship with her. In fact, with 36 years of sobriety, I have, I'm actually going to do another amends with her later today. So that might be why I'm so emotional, because I've, this last trip back home that I mentioned earlier, my sister was there. And one of the things that came up from that is that although I've been making active amends and we have had many conversations about our past together, I have not she does not have a memory of having a true amends from me, having a sit down conversation where I frankly analyze the past as I now see it and lay it out for her and ask for her forgiveness. And so I've worked with my sponsor the 2 weeks since I've been back, and I've written that letter, and she agreed to meet with me today. So I'm at her house and gonna have lunch, and then I'm gonna make a big amends today. So that might be why I'm so emotional, because I couldn't write it, read it, or rewrite it without weeping. So it'll be interesting. So you'll send me off to a really good afternoon of recovery. You know, I'm a member among members in my family today. My parents have more than forgiven me from the past. I have more than forgiven them from the past. We have completely reconciled, and I am, beyond a shadow of a doubt, helpful and useful to them. I could go into that more, but I do want to leave time for Q&A, because that's almost my favorite part. That is my favorite part. I love engaging, and I love a good conversation around our 12 steps. There's also a chapter to employers. You know, how do we re-engage with work? How do we engage and re-engage? How do we make amends? How are we a demonstration to the people around us at work? You know, and then there's a chapter about visioning our fellowship. You know, there's, again, this big book is designed to be me alone on the frontier. So how do I create the fellowship I crave? How do I, you know, stay part of the world, but not get mired down by, you know, by the state of the nation? You know, how do I develop a fellowship? How do I, you know, do this work over the long haul? And by over the long haul, these guys had like a couple of years, you know what I mean? Like, people who were involved in writing the big book, they had like 6 months, you know. I mean, when we're talking about the long haul, we're talking about early sobriety long haul. And it's amazing to me how the information in our book is like just still really instructive to me with decades of sobriety. I mean, it really is a beautiful, beautiful piece of work. And I'm forever changed by it. I believe it's a living, breathing spiritual text that tells me something new every time I open its pages and read it, either alone or with a sponsee or with a sponsor or in a group. It's forever shape-shifting on me. I can go back to the same lines and the same phrases and find different answers in it. And there's always an answer for helping somebody new. So, I think in summary, before I wrap up, if you haven't gleaned this from my tears and my laughter and my enthusiasm for this program, my life is firmly centered in, rooted and grounded in Alcoholics Anonymous. I believe in my heart of hearts that I do have a lot of what we affectionately call the cash and prizes of sobriety. You know, I've had really wonderful intimate relationships. I've had long-term marriage here. I have raised children. I have been a part of many, many communities. I have watched countless people recover from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. And I am continually inspired by it, such that it doesn't bore me. It doesn't make me want to turn my ringer to silent. You know, it makes me want to keep my ringer on. It makes me want to answer the phone. It makes me want to go to more meetings. It makes me want to work with still more suffering people. It makes me want to help people, learn how to help people, because steps 1 through 11 are really instructive, really fascinating, really life altering. And if I do them and stop at step 11, I have not worked an entire complete program. I will absolutely go back to my old way of living and thinking in my own navel gazing spiritual development. I could work as many 4 through 9s as I want and still not get, I believe, this is me just speaking for myself, will not recover from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body unless and until I am actively engaged in working with other people who then are working with other people who are then working with other people, because the act for me of working with other people is it's almost like the exclamation mark, it's the bookend, it's what takes me right back to step 1. It's the confirmation, it's like the validation, I guess, that steps 1 through 11 are operative in my life, is the working with other people. I kind of get it when I'm doing steps 1 through 11, but taking you through it and watching you work steps 1 through 11 and having that front row seat is like, it turns the steps from functional to magical. And the magical is what treats my alcoholism. I don't know if I can say it any other way. And if you don't understand what I'm saying, then I don't know how to explain it any other way. But I get it when I'm working it. And my mind is blown when we're working it together, me as the sponsor or me as the 12, like on this side of the 12th step. And so I guess I'll close by saying, if you haven't had the experience of working with others, oh my gosh, I hope that you're working 1 through 11 with somebody who knows what they're doing and somebody who has what you want and can show you how. And if not, people picked up the book and did it on their own with just the book in the very beginning. So it is accessible and available to you right here and right now. And it is an experience not to be missed. I hope you do not miss it. And I'm just profoundly grateful to be a member and grateful to have something to share today. And I think that's it. I'm done.
Thanks so much.